Welcome back. Hope you had a good week. We're going to get into our transmission, which first things first is going to install a torque converter clutch control, kind of a standalone system that you don't require anything from the factory computer. We have our adapter kit, so we can bolt it to our LS and this new Hughes torque converter. But before we get into that transmission, I want to go ahead and set the cab on the chassis so we kind of get that out of our way. Stay tuned, here we go. I wanted to take a second to point out how cool this kit is for the cab. This is, well, it states that it's a Dennis Carpenter product, but I bought it from Carolina Classics. I always get the vendors' names wrong. It's kind of a thing I do. But when they send me the parts for free, I'll bet you I'll get them right. It's a pretty awesome diagram they've provided. And even the grommets and these pads list like front, bottom. It's cast into there, or it's actually debossed into the rubber. So like, for instance, this says top front. Good job, Dennis Carpenter. Well, this certainly wasn't the worst looking oil I've seen in a transmission pan, but I'm not really a transmission guy either. One thing I want to do before we get too far along, make sure we dig out that seal or gasket, whatever they call it. It always stays in these 700 R4s when you pull out the filter. And I have been in there before where the pans won't go on because there's 2 or 3 of those stacked in there from people servicing them and not taking those out. Wow. That thing is hard as woodpecker lips. All right, y'all pay attention because I'm only going to pretend to know what I'm doing here once. Now the goal of installing this kit is so when it's in 4th gear or overdrive and it recognizes vacuum of 8+ bar, that will tell it that it's cruising at highway speed and it can lock up the torque converter, which is like adding another miniature overdrive, and it allows your fluid to run much cooler because it's not creating any friction whenever the torque converter is locked in place. Oh. Alright, so disconnected this from the factory connector because we're just going to splice into this wire. We're also going to splice into this wire, and that's really the only two splices we have to do here. As you saw, we had to replace this vacuum pressure switch because the factory one is just a single post. I'm going to leave that solenoid the way it is. And basically, this is what comes from TCI. I don't know how clear you can see this harness, but it has two connectors that have to go, boy, I didn't want to lay right, that have to go to our new pressure switch that we installed. So we can just go ahead and take care of that and eliminate any confusion. Step one. Okay. Now, these wires that come 2 into 1, it's going to go to this black wire. Now TCI wants us to use their little weird connectors. I guess we'll give them a shot. I'm not holding out much hope. I'm going to strip this back. Oh, or maybe I'm not. There we go. There we go. I guess the idea is stuff this in here somehow and then thread it. And then we'll stuff that in the other one. I didn't give myself a lot of room here, but it is what it is. All right. Now we'll cut this one. I'm going to go ahead and plug this connector back in just so it gives us an idea of how much slack we're dealing with. There it went. So these two need to tie together. I'll cut a little bit of this excess off. So that's the internal portion of that. Now we can put our new filter on, put our pan on, and the rest of it goes on the outside. The pro tip on this pan gasket is run your bolts in there so the gasket holds them in by the threads and they won't fall out. Plus, you'll have proper gasket alignment. The last step of this install is here on the outside. This connector comes with the TCI kit. You're just going to plug it into this factory connection here. Run 12-volt switch to the red wire, And then this green wire is for an optional manual override to engage the torque converter. Then these two, one is for a ground, which I tapped this hole right here so it would hold a screw with a lock washer on it. So I'll run that in. And so there's our ground. And now these connect to this vacuum switch. And they say in the instructions you can just zip tie this somewhere with the wiring harness in case you can't fasten it very well here. I could maybe make a bracket off of this to mount it. The main thing is as long as it doesn't just get beat up. But this is going to run to the back side of our intake manifold, because when it gets over 8 to 10 inches of pressure in fourth gear, that will tell this to lock the torque converter in. It came with this tiny little Allen wrench that goes right here to make adjustments, so I'm assuming you can add or subtract how much vacuum it takes to lock in your converter. Lastly today, we're going to check out this adapter kit. This is from Advanced Adapters. I ordered it from Summit, part number 712500A. And what it's supposed to do is allow us to install older style transmissions and torque converters to the late model LS engines. And so there's our new flywheel to crankshaft bolts, and they've already got the thread locker cream on there. This is our spacer ring. Basically it just moves where the torque converter would sit. Instead of inside the actual crank, it's going to move out just a little piece. Essentially the same thing's going on with this flex plate. It just spaces it out that same distance, so we have the proper distance from the torque converter to the face of the pump in the transmission. That's because LS crankshafts sit a little tighter in the block than the standard small block Chevys did that these transmissions were designed to bolt up to. So this is the 22-25L, and basically that means it's a 30 spline. It fits like the 4L60, 4L60E, and will fit the 700R4, any of these 30 spline GM transmissions. It's a 12-inch, 2500 stall, and the L stands for it being a lockup converter. Also has the balloon plate. Basically, they build them pretty heavy duty, and a 2500 RPM stall is exactly what our sloppy stage 2 cam calls for. By the way, I thought I'd show where this spacer ring sits perfect right here on the end of that. I'll probably never get it off. I have to use a pry bar now. While we're here, might as well make sure that this thing does fit our bolt pattern. Hey. So we're going to be able to use it, thank goodness. Hey, if you've made it this far, click the like button, because got a little powder coating stuff back. Valve covers and the Valley cover made it. And this is a custom mix of a Cerakote product. When it's wet, it shows a lot of the metallic flake. Can't really see it whenever it's dry, but the headers are still curing because they take 24 hours from the time they were sprayed apparently, and they'd be like 1800 degree proof. So it's gonna be pretty awesome. But that's the engine for the most part. Next week, we'll be sticking it in this chassis and fitting things up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.